So we did a video on the top 10 greatest slashers of all time. I had a blast with that, but there was a lot of people that were like, where's Nightmare on Elm Street 2? Well, on that list, I decided to try to look at things from more of like a grand scope on how the average person would probably do that. But this list, I'm definitely going to make it more personal, so there may be some more dissenting opinions on this one. But let's go ahead and get into this, guys. These are 10 horror sequels that I find to be better than the original. Coming in at number 10 is the movie 10 Cloverfield Lane, which is basically a sequel in the Cloverfield series. None of them really connect all that much as far as I'm aware, but 10 Cloverfield Lane was amazing. It starred John Goodman, who is Dan Connor from Roseanne, which is my favorite show of all time. When I watched this movie, I was for sure convinced I was not going to be afraid of Dan Connor. I mean, he's one of America's favorite dads, but sure enough, John Goodman blew me away. He was freaky as hell playing this guy who you can't really tell at first if he's crazy or if he's actually doing the right thing for these people. I won't spoil it if you haven't seen it, but 10 Cloverfield Lane is one hell of a nail-biting thriller. Check it out. I love it. Alright, so let's get this one out in the open. Number 9 for a horror sequel that's better than the original is A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. Now, why did I not have this in the greatest horror sequels ever video? Because I think if you asked 100 people, maybe 5 would have Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 on their list. So I tried to be a little bit more fair on that list and talk about movies that are really that damn good. But for me, I will say this. I'll take arguments over why Dream Warriors, even Dream Master or New Nightmare are better than Elm Street 2, but I will go to bat saying I think that Elm Street 2 outshines the original. For the biggest reason of, it's actually really scary. I mean, Part 2's Freddy is undeniably freaky. I think we can all agree that whether you like the movie or not, Robert just crushed it in that movie. I also find Mark Patton's performance to genuinely be freaky. Like, you actually can sense his fear on screen. I love all the subtext stuff as well now that I'm aware of it. But yeah, Part 2, terrifying movie, and for me, that makes it way better than Part 1. Coming in at number 8 is one of my favorite sequels of all time. I'm talking about Bride of Reanimator. Now, I know Reanimator is a classic, but for my money, man, Bride just takes the cake. It is one of my favorite horror sequels. It's homaging classic movies, obviously, like Bride of Frankenstein, but you've got those two guys back again in this movie, and their shenanigans are hysterical. The practical effects stuff with the hand eyeball walking across the screen is fantastic, and Herbert West is just more nuts in this movie than the previous one. I love it. It's a love story. It's a special effects movie. It is the start of the 90s. It is perfection. Bride of Reanimator is bigger, badder, better. If you haven't seen it, trust me, it's that damn good. Coming in at number 7 is a movie that really the audience has pushed me to kind of agree with this. Every time I talk to people about this online, they all say that they prefer Creepshow 2, and it's hard to deny it. I mean, Creepshow 2 does something so cool. It's got this feel of being a whimsical adolescent campfire movie. The stories even of like Old Chief Woodenhead, that's something that would come out of a kid's mind about, you know, the statue of the Native American coming back and extracting revenge. Even the raft. I mean, as an adult, I'd be more afraid now of sharks or alligators when I get into the water, but as a kid, this big blob moving in the water, it's so whimsical in nature, it works, but it still packs a punch. I think Creepshow 2 is better at this point. I hate to admit it, but you guys have convinced me more than anything. Also, the soundtrack is so good because it matches that tone that I just talked about. That creepy campfire vibe of the kids sitting around telling ghost stories. It just works. Alright, so we've got to get into some creature feature stuff. Coming in at number 6 is Critters 2. One of the best creature feature movies of all time. Mick Garris came in to direct this one. It tanked at the box office. Apparently nobody was interested in a Critters sequel at the time, but when you watch Critters 2 now, it just works on all levels. The ideas that you would have of what these suckers would do in a movie come to fruition in 2, especially that giant critter ball, which I love so much. You've got beautiful women in this movie, and it's just hysterical. Puppeteer work in this one is above and beyond from the previous one, and this one is just so energetic. I think Critters 2 is easily the best Critters movie, and I also think it outshines Part 1. Love you, D. Wallace, but Part 2 is just money. Coming in at number 5, I think most people will agree with me on this one. Leprechaun 3 has to be one of the best, if not the best ever. I love the first Leprechaun, but for me, Part 3 is just money. It's taking the leprechaun and dropping him into the perfect location. He's all about money and gold, so let's put him in Las Vegas. It just works. You even got people like Caroline Williamson here that have hysterical scenes. I think when it comes to like early 90s horror, Leprechaun 3 is exactly what that genre personified, beyond over the top, and I love it so much. And Warwick Davis just eats up the scenery. I love it. Leprechaun 3 is about as good as it gets for the Leprechaun films. I also love the fact that the poster looks like the Jason Takes Manhattan poster. Coming in at number 4, guys, is Paranormal Activity 3. This one, to me, I didn't think it would be possible to outshine the first movie because I was in the theater when that movie came out, and boy, let me tell you, it was one hell of an experience. But Part 3 just took every technique that was being done with this series and perfected it. I love the motor fan camera angle that just builds so much tension. I love that the story, you really get to find out more about what's going on with this series, and it's just ingenuity in this film all over the place. I love it, and the 80s vibe just works big time for this. Paranormal Activity 3 had a great ending too. It really got me when I was in the theater because I just wasn't expecting what we saw. So I don't think it got better than this in the Paranormal Activity series. Part 1's great. Part 2 is kind of just the same thing over and over again, which I don't really love it. But Part 3, they crushed it. They could have stopped after this, I guess, and I would have been happy, but they didn't. That's Paramount for you. But Part 3, it's the best one to me. Coming in at number 3, guys, is a movie that I'm sure will get me a lot of pushback, but I can't help it. Phantasm 2, to me, outperforms the original. I love the original Phantasm, and I know that we lose Michael A. Baldwin in this, but hell, the guy that they got to play Michael is still good in this. This movie is just magic for Reggie Bannister. He's so good in this, and let's not even forget all the practical effects stuff that is just amazing in this one compared to every other sequel. Stuff with the tall man melting with this yellow goo, the stuff with the priest getting that sphere right into his brain and draining him of his blood. Seeing that creature come out the girl's back is just, what the hell is that? It's amazing. Phantasm 2 is also the closest one that makes sense to me, and I can't help it. Part 2 is amazing. The opening with the tall man coming out of the building and that huge fiery explosion, as well as updating the soundtrack with the theme, making it bigger sounding, forget about it. To me, it doesn't get better than Phantasm 2. Coming in at number 2, guys, is VHS 2. Now, I have this very high up on the list for a reason. This is found footage and anthology. This should just be a disaster all over the place. VHS 2 not only outperforms the original, I think it's one of the best found footage and anthology movies. The scene at the end with the cult just had my jaw on the floor the entire time. This is one of the most daring things I've ever seen in a mixed genre like this, especially two that are difficult to begin with. But yes, the cult sequence just is so impressive. I could not have it on this list, much less at number 2. I kind of wanted to put it at number 1, but you'll see why I didn't when we get to my number 1. But make no mistake, VHS 2 is freaking awesome. Alright guys, coming in at number 1, this is the only movie ever to actually match the intensity and scare factor that I had in my mind when I looked at the cover art of the series. That movie is Hellbound Hellraiser 2. Forget about it. This movie is incredible. So there's a story I've told before, but that when I was a kid, I looked at the VHS of Hellraiser, and when Pinhead looked back at me, I had visions of what this movie was going to be, how dark and intense and just gory it would be. Part 1 didn't exactly live up to what I had in my head, but Part 2 did all the way. That mattress scene is just nightmare fuel. Till this day, I don't care who you are. I love that scene so much. But Hellbound Hellraiser 2 just delivers. To me, not only is this the best sequel of the Hellraiser series, but in my opinion, clearly outperforms Part 1. I think this is the best. So guys, those are 10 horror sequels I think are better than the originals. I'd love to see which ones you would put in your list, and if you disagree with any of the ones I have on here, be sure to leave a comment and let me know. I'm willing to hear you guys out. Let me know what your list is, and if you enjoy these videos, let me know of another top 10 you'd like me to do, and I'd be more than happy to. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time. Huge giant thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. Without you guys, this would not be possible. To get behind the scenes photos, videos, music, private live streams, and much more, you can subscribe to my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Thank you to my patrons.